So welcome everybody. This is the third lunch talk in the series of Energy and Mobility in Transition organized by the BIV Exhibit organization. Today I have the honor to welcome Joannes Laveyne from Ghent University, who will talk about electric mobility and energy transition. Before I pass the floor to Joannes, I first want to highlight some other things. The BIV Exhibit Transport Research Days, they will take place on June 1 and 2 in Leuven, and the registration is already open, so you could already register for the biannual conference. And then the next lunch talk will be not on Wednesday, but on Thursday, February 16. Then Jeroen van den Berg will give his speech about climate policy, transport transition, and geographical space. So with pleasure, I will pass the floor to Joannes.
Yes, thank you, Mario. Okay, so does everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thank you for the invitation and the possibility to share a little bit of my thoughts on the expertise on the role of electromobility in the energy transition. So I prepared a few slides which will serve. They're mostly visuals. They will just serve as the background for my talk. But first, who am I? For the people who don't know me, I'm, so like Mario said, Joannes Laveyne. I'm a researcher at the Electrical Energy Lab of Ghent University. I'm not an economist. I'm an engineer by education. I mainly work on the techno-economical aspects, so there's still a little bit of economic aspects there, of the coexistence between renewable energies and existing forms of energy production, mainly nuclear, and what this means for the future, for the design of the future energy system, both from a technical and an economical standpoint. I haven't been always in academia. I started at the lab in, I think, already 2010, but I made a sidestep to the private industry. I founded a spin-off company working on energy management software, which I then led for around 6 years. And after selling that company, I came back to the energy lab. Next to my activities at the energy lab, I'm also have some other things I do. I'm a member of the public health FOD, so the High Council on the Hoge Gezondheidsraad, where I'm a committee member of the nuclear emergency planning. So if you want to know what to do when a nuclear disaster happens, you can always call me. I'm also a member of the Academic Advisory Board of ELIA and a member of the High Council for a Just Transition, which is initiative from the Belgian government to provide input to the Just Transition Committee of the European Union. So, like I said, I will share some thoughts and a little bit expertise of my background on the role of electromobility in the energy transition. But first, I think we need to understand the energy transition, and this will mainly focus on the electrical aspect, so the electrical grid, and to understand where we are going with the energy transition, it's important to look back on the historical aspects of our electrical grid. Our electrical grid, especially in Belgium, used to be quite simple, not complex. It was quite straightforward. You had just big power plants, big central power plants which produced electricity. It got transported through the high voltage grid to big consumers, the large industries. It got transformed to medium level voltage for medium consumers like smaller companies and large retail establishments. And then there was also the low voltage distribution grid, which supplied us, the families, the residential, the homes with electricity. So it was a pretty straightforward system, and especially in Belgium, because, well, it used to be that the electricity was produced by Electrabel, then it got transported by Electrabel. They also did the medium voltage distribution with help from the local communities, so the cities. And they also did the low voltage distribution grid. So we had this accepted monopoly position, and one company that was essentially the whole electrical system. The same was true for the money flows. So people just paid Electrabel for everything, so distribution and electricity production, and Electrabel reimbursed a part of this to their shareholders, mainly the communities, the cities, the municipalities. So this was the historic system. It was very straightforward, and it's quite funny to realize that this isn't really this past. It's not that long ago. It was like still this way in 2005, 2008. So this was the situation in Belgium for a very long time. However, the liberalization of the energy market, which was started by the directives on the liberalization, European directives of 1996, well, they disturbed the market, or they changed the existing system. One of the main things was that the unbundling. So the transport and the distribution of electrical grid had to be separated from the producers of electricity. This was to encourage more competition than producing electricity. If one player, and it's the dominant incumbent player, has both the network and the most electricity power plants in their possession, well, they can easily block the market or block entry for new competitors. So the ownership of the distribution and transport systems needed to be separated from Electrabel. This went to other companies like you can see here, Elia, which was responsible for transport, Eandist and VVM. This is just for the Flemish side, of course. They got ownership of the distribution grids, and Electrabel went on just as an energy producer and an energy retailer. This also meant that other parties could join the market. We had EDF Belgium, which then became Luminous, which took over some parts of SPE, and later on other companies as well joined the market. Suddenly we went from, in like the course of 10 years, from an electricity system dominated by one player to a whole vibrant ecosystem of different parties, of different energy producers. So coming back to our historic electrical grid structure, well, this is now not longer the case with Electrabel everywhere here, but this is the current structure. So it looks a little bit more, well, a lot more complex, because we know not only have the incumbent player like an NG Electrabel, but we also have all these other players who are active on different parts of the electrical system, of the electricity system. Some have, like NG, they have also power producing plants. Some of them are only renewable, so like wind turbines or solar panels. Other parties just don't have energy production systems, but they are just a retailer. They buy electricity from the market and sell them to customers. So it gets a little bit more complex. We also have departure from the fully centralized system. So we have now solar panels, like you can see here on houses or on shops or companies. We also have wind turbines. They inject energy. Houses are not only consumers anymore; they are also producers, leading to the term prosumers. So energy flows there go bidirectionally as well. We have, and that will be the further part of this presentation, also the emergence of electric vehicles, which can charge both at work or at home. And later on, we'll also be able to transport electricity from one location to another. So the current model is more complex than it used to be, but it also presents a lot of added benefits and possibilities. One of the main benefits of this liberalization of the energy market is European integration. I personally think this is one of the major success stories in the European history of energy. It's not done yet, but we are now having, at least on the wholesale level, a single market for electricity across Europe. So normally, when there is no congestion on the electrical grid, prices for electricity are actually the same in the whole of Europe. Coming to those prices, it can also be shown that the liberalization of the electricity system also led to consistent low prices. Even in that case, even in a way that the liberalization got a lot of flack, got a lot of complaints about electricity producers. Because they were unhappy. They said, this liberalization, this electricity market, this unified electricity market doesn't work because prices are too low. And that's true. After liberalization, we saw consistent low electricity prices on the wholesale market, I have to say. Even in such a way that because the electricity prices were so low, governments and policymakers across Europe just offloaded additional taxes to the energy bill. So in a lot of countries, the end user didn't see this benefit because a lot of taxes got added to the electricity bill. But on a wholesale level, the electricity market has proven to work quite efficient. This, of course, has changed in the last year because of the energy crisis and the extreme gas prices we saw, and then we got to see the opposite end. Electricity producers were then happy, but the consumers and the policymakers weren't happy because prices were too high. In both cases, they blamed the electricity market, but there were, of course, other underlying problems which we won't see in this presentation. That's a whole other thing. Another success story of the liberalization is the emergence of renewable energy. In a market that's being dominated by an incumbent player, like we still have in France, there's little need for innovation. Like in France, you see that it's being dominated by nuclear generation. This also used to be the case in Belgium. So there's no need to invest or research new types of electricity production. Because it's pretty much seen as a solved problem. There's a fixed revenue scheme for the incumbent player, so you don't need innovation. The liberalization shook this up and has led to the emergence of renewable energy and a spectacular increase of renewable energy in the total electricity production. These are some graphs of the Amber Electricity Review report just released yesterday, where you can see the rise of renewable energy, especially here in green, solar and wind in the last 20 years. It literally came from nothing up until it's now 21% of the total electricity production. It's even more if you add hydro to the mix. Then we're at around 30 something. This is quite well, it still seems small, but this is actually quite a fast growth, especially since it's just started around 2005 with very small numbers, and now we're already to 21% wind and solar, and the growth won't stop there. If you look at, for example, the Netherlands, they plan to have 2/3 of their electricity production coming from solar and wind by 2030. That's actually tomorrow. So this growth will really improve and accelerate a lot in the coming years. Also, you can see here that this renewable growth really pushed out coal for the most part. There was a very slight comeback last year, but it's really marginal. It pushed out coal, so that's actually also good for the climate and for our of emissions we have. Why has renewable energy, or rather, why has it become the growth rate so fast? Well, it's because of a spectacular dropping costs of especially renewable energy. This has also, of course, been driven by the demand for renewable energy, which has in turn led to scale benefits. And these scale benefits are shown here in spectacular drop of costs, especially solar. The prices in the course of around 10 years, they dropped by 9 times. Also, offshore and onshore wind dropped spectacular. Gas and coal stayed a little bit the same, while nuclear got more expensive. But that's a whole other story. But mainly, energy companies are now investing in renewable energy because it's the cheapest form of electricity, and we're coming to a tipping point where, even including system costs like balancing, a system based around renewable energy is the most cost-effective system. Doesn't mean it has to be 100% renewables, but the main part of the electricity generation in most scenarios, modeling this is renewable in order to achieve the lowest cost. Now, this rise of renewable energy also comes with some drawbacks or challenges. There's one rule in electrical grids that needs to be followed, and that is that production must, in every single moment, equal consumption of electricity. For example, if I turn up the brightness of my screen here, it consumes somewhat more electricity. That means that somewhere in the European electricity system, a power plant needs to produce a watt or two extra electricity, and this balance has to be kept constantly. It's sometimes said that electricity is a special commodity, and that's true because we can't store it. We can't have like buffers or reserves. And that's, of course, because electricity travels at the speed of light, or close up anyway. That means that you can't produce electricity and store it for later. Well, or rather, you couldn't. that's with the rise of batteries, of course, this opens up new possibilities, but this used to be not possible because power plants, they are quite slow. If they if you need to start up additional power plants, it takes a lot of time, and even pumped hydro storage is slow. If the consumption of electricity rises quite fast because, for example, a big factory starts up. It takes at least 5 to 10 minutes for pumped hydro plants to react. So that's too slow because electricity travels at the speed of light. It needs to be instantly. So this is quite a challenge, because especially now especially because of the rise of intermittent renewables. If this rule is broken, well, you get blackouts, and these can be quite spectacular. Like you can see here in August 2003, the region of New York suffered a major blackout, and this is just because if consumption does not equal production, you get these problems. So it's a metastable system or electricity system. Renewable energy can pose an additional challenge here. For example, here you can see the forecasted wind power of a day. I think it was in September, and the actual generated wind power. So as you can see, wind generated a lot more than was expected. So here you get a surplus of electricity, and the grid has to cope with it, of course. So this is a challenge. We're getting better and better at actually forecasting, a better forecasting of wind energy, but still this remains a challenge. An additional challenge is that renewable energy production, even if it's forecasted accurately, does not necessarily match the consumption of electricity. As you can see here, this bell curve is the ideal production curve, output curve of a solar system or solar panel system, but this does not necessarily match the system load of a country like Belgium, shown in blue, which typically is lower during the night and then starts early in the morning. So also there, there's a certain mismatch. Engineers and perhaps economists as well call this sometimes the duck curve, because if you take, for example, this load curve. So again, we have in blue the total system load of the electrical system. In gray, we have the solar output. If you subtract the two, so the residual load, well, if you look here, it still peaks in the morning, then it drops during the day because of the solar output, and then it rises again during the evening. So this is called the duck curve. Why it's called the duck curve? Well, with my very good drawing skills, I made this overlap. So this is you can a little bit see the duck in here. So that's why it's called the duck curve, and it's also a challenge because the residual load that needs to be generated varies quite heavily during the day. You could call it the duck curve, but the duck says quack. Sometimes I see something different in it. I see a quack beer in it as well. So perhaps we can rename it that way as well. Coming to the main subject of our of this presentation, it's the role that the electric vehicles can play in it. Like I said, electricity couldn't be stored before, or not in a fast way, because pumped hydro plants still have some latency. They are quite slow in electrical terms, but perhaps electric vehicles can be a solution or a part of the solution here, because battery electric vehicles, of course, they have a large battery capacity, and we expect them to be a big part of the upcoming sales of vehicles in the future, reaching a certain threshold by 2030 already. And especially in Belgium, we expect this to be the case because of the required electrification of company cars, of salary cars, but probably you know better. I think there are around 600,000 or something in Belgium, so these need to be electrified. The benefit of this for the electricity system is that these electric vehicles have quite a large battery capacity. I've mapped some of the capacities of the different models here. Of course, different models you can also select different battery ranges there. But if you look at the size of a typical home battery energy storage system, which is around 3 to 9 kilowatt hours, you can see that most of these cars they have quite well, the energy storage they have is much larger. Also, the typical daily consumption of a household in Belgium is around 9 kilowatt hours a day. So you can see that for example, in the mid-range segment, or in the and especially the high-range segment, these battery capacities are much bigger than what an average household uses every day. Additionally, these capacities don't really match with the daily miles driven. So the commuting needs of the average Belgian is much lower than the battery capacity. So they only use every day a small part of the capacity of their battery. Just also to give an impression, but we won't go into the subject of EV trucks. But if we take a look at the expected battery capacity of EV trucks, that's even enormously more bigger, of course, presenting its own challenges. But we won't really go into that in this presentation, just to give an idea. Next to battery capacity, there's also the issue of, or rather the aspect of power. So battery capacity is energy, but charging that battery comes down to power. If we take a look at the average household peak, in Belgium, it's between 3 and 5 kilowatts. It's mostly reached in the evening when people come home and start to cook and turn on their television and things like that. So it's reached them. If we take a look at the peak that an electric vehicle that's being charged at home can draw, well, you can see, in mode 1, but that's seldomly used. That peaks out at around 2 to 3 kilowatts. But the most used mode 3, it ranges from 3 kilowatts to 23 kilowatts. So that's also that can also pose a challenge if people just come home, plug in their electric vehicle and charge at full power. Well, you can see that the peak that's being drawn then is multiple times higher than the average household peak. So this could be an issue. Just to give a comparison how this home charging power compares to fast charging, if we look at generation of fast chargers, it's incrementally, it's not incrementally, it's a lot higher than also home charging. So first generation of fast charging maxed out at 150 kilowatts, but now we have, like in the Ionity network, we have fast chargers that go up to 350 kilowatt. If you compare that to the average household peak, well, one fast charger is around 80 to 100 households in charging peak, in power peak. Still, this is nothing compared to the expected power needs for truck charging, which goes up to 1.2 megawatts. That's actually the peak of a whole of a small village. But again, it's just to give an impression about some of the challenges in electromobility, but heavyweight electric transport is something for another presentation. So we have a lot of challenges ahead of us concerning electromobility, but however, there are also some, luckily, some silver linings there. First statement or first thing we see is that the electrical consumption of the upcoming electromobility revolution is luckily it's doable, so to say. So in 2020, it amounts to little to nothing. It's around just shy of 2 terawatt hours of total electrical consumption. It's around 2 terawatt hours a year, and in comparison, the total energy consumption of Belgium yearly consumption is 84 terawatt hours. It rises slightly to around 7 terawatt hours in 2030, and then it goes up quite fast. But compared to the expected rise of the total Belgium electrical consumption, it is still quite small. This is, of course, because most electric vehicles only drive limited number of kilometers during especially during the daily commute, and electric vehicles are quite efficient, around 15 to 17 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, and probably getting more efficient by 2030 and later as time goes on. Also, if we chart the expected rise in electricity consumption of electromobility with the expected increase of only wind and solar production in Belgium, these are numbers for Belgium, the rise of wind and solar production more than outmatches the rise of expected electrical consumption by electromobility. So that's a good thing. So the energy of the required energy consumption of electromobility is not really the issue in Belgium or in Europe. However, what is the issue is the power. So not the energy, but the power. These are slides from simulations that the transport grid operator Elia made, and they see a problem appearing when we all switch to electric vehicles, and we come home and we just plug them in and they start charging. This is what is called uncoordinated charging. If we do that, then there will be an issue. Here again, you can see a little bit with some imagination the duck curve. So we have the average system load in orange, and then here the bars are the average renewable energy production with a peak during noon because of the solar peak. What you see is if we just treat electric vehicles as we do as we treat them like other electrical assets, we risk running into some issues here at around 7 o'clock in the afternoon. when people come home. Normally, that's already the system peak load because people start preparing their meals and things. If we then plug in our electric vehicles, well, this peak will just get higher and we'll get, for example, here above the 12 gigawatt peak, which is more or less the peak load of the Belgium electrical system. So if we just use electric vehicles in an uncoordinated way, well, this will be on a very big problem in the future. So the thing that needs to happen is that charging the batteries of electric vehicles needs to be coordinated. There can be several levels of coordinated charging. This is, for example, smart charging. This is just adapting the time and the power of charging during the day. For example, if you look here at the evening peak, imagine you come home at 6 or 7 o'clock. You plug in your electric vehicle, but you only start charging during the night, so not immediately. There's no additional peak being caused by the charging of your electric vehicle, so the peak stays the same. And it only starts to diverge here during the night when we typically already have a lower load on the system, and the electric vehicle starts charging here. The same can be done during the day. If, for example, we charge our vehicles during the day, we can absorb this additional production of renewable electricity and charge our electric vehicles with it. So coordinated charging does not only entail a timely way of charging your electric vehicle at home, but also having enough infrastructure at work to charge your vehicle there, and if possible, even with renewable energy produced by, for example, solar panels on the roof of your employer. If we do that, we can spread out this duck curve. We can flatten this curve somewhat more, and that's actually beneficial for our electrical system. We can even take it somewhat further with vehicle to grid. So vehicle to grid is not only taking electricity from the grid to charge your vehicle, but also giving it back to the injecting it back into the grid when it's appropriate. This is quite a complex figure, but again, if you take a look at the blue line, that's the average load when just using uncoordinated charging. The orange is the load when you use coordinated charging, so a timely charging. So you can see that we can increase the load during the night, but also during the day when we have a lot of solar production. So this flattens out a little bit more. But you can also, with vehicle to grid, charge it during the night and during the day. But then when you get back home with your electric vehicle at around 6 to 7 o'clock, you can connect your electric vehicle to your home and inject energy back into the grid. And then you can actually lower the typical consumption peak during the evening by injecting power you charged from, for example, solar panels during the day. You can inject it back into the grid during the evening. In a somewhat simplified figure, it comes down to using this part here, so which is actually the excess solar production, taking it with you in your electric vehicle, and then flattening this part of the curve here during the evening. If we use that, you can see that we can flatten this system load curve quite somewhat. So here in blue, we see the average residual load during a day. With vehicle to grid charging, we can actually flatten the curve, the residual load curve. We can bring it closer to this average curve, and that's actually a good thing because it simplifies the management of the electrical grid, and it also reduces peak loads, and it leads to a better utilization factor of our electrical system. So some main takeaways from these graphs is that, like we saw, electricity generation becomes more intermittent due to the increase of renewable energy, which is intermittent and sometimes not always accurately forecasted. But additionally, we also see that the batteries in electric vehicles, well, they are oversized for the average Belgium commuting distance. So we can actually use this capacity to balance the grid, to balance these renewables. We also saw that it's not the energy for electromobility that is an issue. So electricity consumption will increase in the future with electromobility, but the increase of renewable energy more than outmatches it. So that's not the issue, but power consumption is the issue. And we really need to have this coordinated charging of electric vehicles. Otherwise, we will pretty soon run into problems. But luckily, we can use the batteries of these electric vehicles for it, and we can turn this liability, of course, into an asset, and use electric vehicles to stabilize and strengthen our electrical grid. How do we get there? That's still one of the main challenges that remains well in the works. It's not unsolved, but it's in the works. One is, of course, we need to have the required infrastructure. So both charging system, home chargers, but also digital meters, things like these need to be there in order to control and optimize the charging of electric vehicles. There's also a need for more open data access. The control and the data of the batteries inside the electric vehicles, well, it needs to be able to be used by different parties. What we see now is that a lot of manufacturers of electric vehicles shield off their apps, they shield off control to their devices. They won't share it. But in an open ecosystem, that open data access is really required. And we also need some changes to our existing market system, because a lot of the things we want to do with electric vehicles in the future are currently not supported by regulations, synergrid regulations or market regulations. So there's also some requirements of regulations required there. Coming back to one of the first slides, so we have the current model here. So more decentralized production, more different market parties. Where will we end up in the next years? Well, it will become somewhat more complex because we have a lot of different parties involved with electromobility here, and it can sometimes be quite complex. So I just put some names here. It's just random, but what you see here is like a company like Rialto, which will be a flexibility company which can control electric vehicles and sell that flexibility to renewable energy producers, but also to the transport system grid operator, to actually make use of the flexibility. So charge or decharge your vehicle to provide flexibility to the grid, and of course you get reimbursed for that. But there are also other parties appearing, for example, CPOs, charge point operators. These are the companies that operate the charging, the vehicle chargers on the streets, but also sometimes in your home. We see the leasing companies also having interest in this market. We see the car manufacturers also moving into the electricity business. So in the future, it will be somewhat more complex. And it's important that this complexity gets abstracted away from the end user. The end user should just be able, with their smartphone app, just be able to subscribe to a flexibility provider, see what this flexibility provider offers the user, set their own limits. For example, I want to always have that amount of charge in my vehicle. I don't want it to charge or discharge more than once an evening, things like these. So there's a lot of work to be done in simplifying this whole setup and abstracting the complexity away from the end user. However, this electric vehicle revolution is coming anyway, so we need to shape it from the start and make sure that the regulation is in place, so we don't have to change it along the way. For example, this is an excerpt of the regulation, of the fiscal regulation for home chargers. So if you install a home charger and you want to have a tax deduction for it, one of the requirements is that the home charger should have an open data access, so you can use it with your own home energy management system or connect it to the management system of a flexibility provider. I think that's a good example of good regulation, because this openness, this possibility to connect it to different systems will be very important in the coming future. So this is an example of good regulation, but still there is a lot of work to be done, both on the technical side as on the regulation side. And with that said, that's also my last slide. I hope it's not too much a repetition of probably what you already knew. It's sometimes difficult for me to gauge what's already known, of course. But yeah, I'm also open for any questions you might have, and also feel free to contact me on in any way you see fit.
Thank you very much, Joannes, for your excellent presentation. So I'll open up the floor for any questions. So please raise your hand, then you can raise any question you might have for Joannes. So a first question can come from me. Are currently all electric vehicles already ready for this bidirectional charging? Or?
No. It's really. Currently, I think it's just Mitsubishi which has a prototype that's already in the field, and the Leaf. I think the Leaf can also do bidirectional, but the Leaf is quite limited in battery capacity, and it's also a different type of battery that we find in other electric vehicles. We see it coming, however. If you look at the eGMP platform of manufacturers like the Korean manufacturers, it already has vehicle to load. So that's actually turning your battery, the energy from your battery into a 230 volt, 50 hertz AC signal. You can't connect it yet to the grid, but you can run your regular appliances from it. but that's already the first step towards it. So the only thing missing is synchronization between the electric vehicle and the grid. So it's coming. Why are manufacturers a little bit hesitant? It's because they have to hand over the battery more to the end user, and the way the end user uses this battery can also affect the wear and tear on the battery and the battery capacity in the long run. So they are a little bit hesitant because, yeah, if the battery wears, then the consumer will turn to the manufacturer, say, yeah, this battery it doesn't have the capacity it used to have, but it can be because the way the user used it. So they are a little bit hesitant, but it's coming. It's unavoidable.
Okay, thank you. Laurent, do you still have a question? Because at a certain moment I saw you raising your hand.
Well, I had a question, but I think Joannes already answered on the impact of vehicle to grid on the wear and tear of batteries. I remember that this was a really big issue a few years ago, but so how is it really evolving for batteries? I mean, I suppose you need technical changes to the batteries to make them more adaptable. But are things evolving on that side? Mm.
Yes, it's actually quite complex. It requires improvements to the battery chemistry, but also to the battery management system. The easiest fix that most manufacturers do now is because batteries get more compact, they have reserve capacity. So a lot of the manufacturers they have more capacity in their battery than they allow to be used. So the state of charge does not have to reach 100% of the battery capacity, but can be lower, like 90 or even 80%. And this reduces stress on the battery and also increases longevity and reduces the wear and tear on the battery pack. And that's something that's now possible in the past few years because batteries get more compact, get cheaper, so it doesn't really impact the cost of the battery of the electric vehicle that much. So that's an easy fix. There are also changes possible in the battery chemistry. So this wear and tear is slowly improving. There is, however, still one additional aspect, that's calendar aging. Lithium-ion batteries, they reduce in capacity if you use them or not. It's called calendar aging. The older they get, the less capacity they have. But still, also there, changes in battery chemistry are improving to mitigate this effect.
Thank you very much. Any other question? Feel free to raise your questions.
Yeah, it's indeed an interesting question, and we'll have to see what it will be. The thing you have is that batteries, the wear and tear in batteries is also dictated by the amount of charging cycles. What is a charging cycle? It's actually if you go from charging your battery to discharging and then back to charging, that's a cycle because the chemistry in the battery needs to be reversed. And in a normal operation of electric vehicle, you just drive it, and once the battery capacity gets too low, you charge it again. And you can actually drive for several days during your regular commute distance before charging it again. And that's only one charge cycle. But if you connect it every day to your home, and well, first at your employer you connect it, you charge, for example, solar electricity there. Then you drive home. That's one charging cycle already. There you plug it in. It discharges further into your home, but it charges again during the evening. That's an additional charging cycle. So it will be indeed interesting to see how the battery life will hold out in the future. And I think it will be like this race between technological improvements of the battery and the additional use cases from vehicle to grid.
So in the meanwhile, Joannes, maybe in terms of legislation, the European Commission will in 20, I don't know the exact year, force electric vehicle sales. To what extent in this legislation, maybe you're aware, does it include also regulation regarding the battery and the type of charging, or is that left undecided so far?
I'm not familiar with those stipulation in the regulation. I think it's left to the manufacturer. But the European Commission is aware, and it's also part of the digitalization agenda that the electric batteries in the vehicles will play a big role in the future electricity system, and the need for what is called interoperability is very big. So we need to prevent walled gardens from coming into existence, where different manufacturers shield off their electric cars and don't allow third parties to use them. But of course, a lot of manufacturers have other thoughts, because, for example, Volkswagen is also moving into the electricity business. Tesla is already there. So yeah, there's also some other forms of lobbying going on currently as well.
Here is the question from Alexander. Do we need parallel electric grid for charging? I mean, new infrastructure. What about diameter of wires we need to organize a new station?
Yeah, I think we need to prevent parallel grids from coming into existence and reducing the need for grid infrastructure upgrades, because these are quite costly. And one of the things we see is that there is an evolution towards capacity tariffs. So capacity tariffs make sure that the distribution tariff you pay is based on the peak you draw from the grid, but in the future also inject into the grid. And it incentivizes the users to spread out their energy consumption, for example, the charging of your battery, to avoid peaks, because it's not the amount of energy that gets transported to through grids that is the problem, it's the peak load. And capacity tariffs give a financial incentive to spread out your consumption, reduce the peak load on the grid, and also raise the utilization factor of the grids. And if it's implemented correctly, it can mitigate. It won't prevent, but it can mitigate the need for grid infrastructure upgrades.
Thank you, Joannes and Alexander, for this question. Is there a follow-up question from Alexander on this, or you're happy with Joannes' response? What about the diameter for the pump station?
Yeah. There's indeed a challenge concerning stations with fast chargers. So we saw that a single charger can go up to 350 kilowatts if you have an island of fast chargers. Well, the amount of power required there is indeed quite high, and this can be an issue in future grid planning. I can only speak for Belgium, but in Belgium we have somewhat the benefit that we have quite a dense transport infrastructure and electrical. Well, there's a lot of overlap between our transport electrical infrastructure and our highways. So probably in Belgium it won't be that difficult to electrify pump stations, but for charging stations located in more like retail neighborhoods or residential neighborhoods, that could be an issue. And their upgrades to the medium voltage grid will probably be required. One of the issues is also, again, utilization factor, because it is to be expected that a lot of people will want to charge at the same time. So there will be a high peak load as well. So again, there will have to be some kind of financial incentive to avoid or rather to incentivize the people to spread their fast charging needs if possible. But that's quite that's an economic challenge.
Then we have also a remark and question from Stefan. South Africa is now battling with 6 or 8 hours load shedding per day. The government has basically a monopoly and will be unable to stop this in the context of 2 years. So solar and wind becomes an option with daily sunshine 8 to 12 hours and temperature around 30 degrees. A home generation is an option, and the government is now considering purchasing from private households. The EV storage does make that a potential option. Can lower the cost of home generation and electric vehicle use.
Yeah, that's a good remark. I've heard about the problems Eskom is facing. It's quite a challenge.
Okay, since we are over our 1 hour, I think we all have to applaud Joannes again for his excellent presentation. So let's thank Joannes again for the excellent presentation.
Thank you. My pleasure.